They sold the house, they bought the van, and 12 months later, they were back in an apartment, broke, exhausted, and embarrassed to tell anyone what went wrong. This isn't a rare story. It's the most common outcome in retirement van life, and almost nobody talks about it because the people it happens to are too ashamed to make a video about it. Today, I'm going to show you exactly what causes that regret spiral, why it almost always starts before the purchase, and what the 30% of retirees who don't regret it do differently from day one. I'm also going to tell you something the dealers, the manufacturers, and frankly most of the channels you've been watching have a direct financial interest in never telling you. There are 4 mistakes that turn a retirement dream into a $40,000 lesson, and if you're within 12 months of buying a camper van or motorhome, you need to know all 4 before you sign anything. Let's get into it. The real regret stat. That 70% figure isn't a headline invented to get clicks. It comes from owner surveys across RV and motorhome communities in both the US and Europe, and it consistently shows that within the first 12 to 18 months, the majority of retiree buyers report significant regret about either the specific vehicle they chose, the lifestyle they expected, or both. Here's the critical distinction most channels skip entirely. The regret is almost never about van life itself. It's about the mismatch between what the buyer imagined and what they actually bought. That's a completely different problem, and it has a completely different solution. The people who walk away bitter didn't make a lifestyle mistake. They made a purchasing mistake. Wrong vehicle, wrong budget, wrong expectations. And here's the part that should stop you cold. The warning signs were visible before they signed, every single time. They just didn't know what to look for because the people who could have told them were too busy selling them the dream. The industry enemy frame. Let's talk about what's actually happening in this market, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. The RV and motorhome industry is built on aspiration selling. The RV shows, the dealer showrooms, the manufacturer marketing, and yes, the majority of YouTube channels in this space are all participating in the same commercial ecosystem. The content looks like education. It functions like advertising. When a channel takes you on a tour of a beautiful Airstream or a kitted-out Heimer, they are not showing you the slide-out failure at month 6. They're not showing you the campsite fee spreadsheet. They're not showing you the couple who stopped speaking properly to each other by week 3 because there was nowhere to go. They're showing you the golden hour shot from the cliff edge, because that's what gets clicks and that's what sells vehicles. I'm not saying the van life channels are lying to you. I'm saying they're showing you a curated version of a reality that is far more complicated than it looks. And the industry that profits from that curation has spent years perfecting the art of making you feel like the only thing standing between you and freedom is a purchase agreement. That's the environment you're buying in. Know it. Factor it in. Let me tell you about David and Carol. David spent 30 years in logistics management. Carol was a high school principal. Both 64, recently retired. Between them, a pension income, a paid-off home, and a retirement plan they'd been quietly building in their heads for 2 years before they acted on it. They watched the channels, read the forums, went to the RV show in January, and they fell hard for a Tiffin Wayfarer. Sleek, well-built, fixed bed, a bathroom that felt like a real bathroom. They paid $112,000 in March, 2 months after seeing it at the show. By August, just 5 months in, Carol had flown home twice, not for emergencies, just because she needed walls that weren't moving. David had clocked $6,200 in campsite fees, was sleeping badly from road noise, and had already absorbed a $4,400 slide-out repair the dealer initially refused to cover on warranty. By the following January, 10 months after signing, they sold the Wayfarer at a $19,000 loss. But here's the moment that stayed with me. The night before they listed it for sale, David sat alone in the van. Carol was already inside the rental they'd found, and he sat there, in the dark, this man who'd managed multi-million-dollar supply chains, who'd never made a careless financial decision in his professional life, and he said to himself, "I didn't buy a van. I bought the most expensive way to find out I wasn't a van person. That sentence is the whole story. And what makes it tragic isn't the money. It's that David was never actually not a van person. He just bought the wrong van at the wrong time with the wrong preparation and walked into 4 specific mistakes that nobody in his buying journey had a financial incentive to warn him about. Here's what those 4 mistakes look like.
Mistake 1. Buying the build instead of the platform. David didn't fall in love with the Tiffin Wayfarer because of its chassis. He fell in love with the interior, the cabinetry, the layout, the feeling it gave him standing inside at the show. That's the trap, and it's the most expensive purchasing mistake in the retiree buyer market. Here's the principle that separates smart buyers from regret buyers. Buy the platform, not the build. The chassis, whether that's a Mercedes Sprinter, a Ford Transit, a Ram ProMaster, or a Fiat Ducato, is what determines your long-term cost of ownership. The interior is furniture. The drivetrain is infrastructure. When David's slide-out failed, the issue wasn't Tiffin specifically. Slide-outs on any conversion require specialist attention, often through the manufacturer's own service network. If you're traveling and that network isn't nearby, you park and you wait. Waiting in van life isn't an inconvenience. It's $200 a night while a part ships from a warehouse 800 miles away. The buyers who avoid this chose differently. They bought vehicles on standardized commercial platforms through manufacturers with national service coverage. In the US, Winnebago, Airstream, Pleasureway, all building on Transit or Sprinter chassis, all with dealer networks that span the country. In Europe, Heimer, Berstner, Carthago, brands with cross-border service infrastructure that actually functions when you're broken down in southern France. The interior is what you fall in love with at the show. The platform is what you live with for the next decade. Buy accordingly. Here's the brutal one-line summary of what David actually bought. He didn't buy a camper van, he bought a second job and paid $112,000 for the pleasure of applying. Mistake 2. The hidden cost blind spot. Most retirees budget for the purchase price, almost none budget for total cost of ownership, and the gap between those two numbers is where retirement funds go to disappear quietly. Here's what a realistic first-year cost picture looks like on a mid-range purchase in 2026. Say you buy a used Class B motorhome, a Winnebago Travato, or an older Pleasureway Plateau for $85,000. Controlled, sensible, but watch what happens when you fill in the honest ledger. Full-time live-aboard insurance in the U.S. runs $2,000 to $4,000 per year, significantly higher than recreational use policies. In the UK, France, and Germany, full timing coverage runs 20 to 40% above standard motorhome rates. Then there's the campsite math. A full hookup site at a managed U.S. campground runs $40 to $80 per night. That's up to $2,400 per month just to park. Over a year, that's $15,000 to $28,000 in site fees on top of your financing. Fuel, maintenance reserve, propane, tires, the inevitable first-year repair that every used vehicle carries, mail forwarding and domicile setup costs if you're going full-time. By the time it's totaled honestly, operating that $85,000 van costs between $30,000 and $45,000 in year 1, on top of the purchase price. David and Carol ran a rough estimate. They didn't run a spreadsheet. That distinction cost them $19,000 on resale and another $30,000 in operating costs they hadn't mapped. Stop here for a second, because this is the moment in the video where I need you to actually pause. If you are financing more than 40% of your camper van purchase at current interest rates, you are not buying freedom, you are buying pressure. You are signing up for a monthly obligation that follows you to every beautiful sunrise, every coastal road, every moment that was supposed to feel like escape. The van doesn't care about your retirement dream. The loan payment comes on the same date every month, whether you're parked at the Grand Canyon or sitting in a dealer's lot waiting for a warranty repair. Run the number, honestly, before you sign. Mistake 3. Buying in the wrong market window. The 2026 campervan market is still correcting from one of the most distorted buying periods in the industry's history. The pandemic frenzy between 2020 and 2022 pushed used vehicle prices to historically inflated levels, near new prices for 5-year-old high-mileage vehicles. Then, the correction hit, new inventory returned, interest rates rose, used prices softened, but not evenly and not fully. Retirees who bought at peak pricing in 2021 or 2022 are now selling into a buyer's market at losses of $15,000 to $30,000 on mid-range vehicles. In Europe, tightening overnight parking restrictions, rising fuel costs, and campsite fee inflation across France, the UK, and Southern Europe have shifted real operating costs well beyond what buyers modeling against 2021 or 2022 data expected. The smart buyer in 2026 understands they are entering a correcting market. An extra 60 to 90 days of disciplined research rather than buying on emotion at an RV show can save $10,000 to $20,000 on purchase price alone before you've even factored in avoiding a vehicle with deferred maintenance that hits you in month 3. The market is no longer an emergency. Stop buying like it is. Mistake 4. Skipping the relationship audit. Here's the mistake that nobody in this space will say out loud, and I'm going to say it anyway because it's the one that ends most van life journeys, and it has nothing to do with the vehicle. The biggest predictor of first-year regret isn't the van, it's the relationship. In a house, a partnership has natural pressure valves, different rooms, different rhythms, space to decompress without ever having to negotiate it. In a 19-foot van, there is no pressure valve. Everything you've quietly navigated around for 30 years of shared life becomes inescapable. Every habit, every morning rhythm, every preference about temperature and noise and silence, it's all in a room the size of a large bathroom, together, all day, with nowhere else to go. Carol didn't fly home twice because she hated van life. She flew home because she needed to remember what it felt like to be alone in a kitchen for 20 minutes. That's not a character flaw. That's a human being realizing she'd removed every decompression mechanism from her daily life in a single purchase decision, and nobody had asked her if that was going to be okay. The couples who handle van life well share two things. They did genuine trial runs of 3 to 4 weeks before committing to a purchase, and they had an honest, uncomfortable conversation about what solo time looks like inside 60 square feet. The couples who struggle skipped the trial. They watched the videos, fell in love with the idea, and assumed the feeling of freedom would smooth over everything. It doesn't, and no dealer, no forum, and no channel with a manufacturer partnership is going to tell you that, because none of them get paid when you decide to wait.
Here's what mistake 4 looks like when it fully plays out. The night Carol made the permanent decision to leave, not to fly home for a visit, but to actually be done, she packed one bag. She didn't pack angrily. She didn't slam doors. She just said to David, "I love you. I love our marriage, but I don't love who I am in here." And then she got in a rideshare, and David watched the taillights disappear down a campground road at 9 p.m., alone in a van that still smelled new, in a state they'd never lived in, with no plan and no one to call. That's the moment the dream ends. Not with a dramatic fight, not with a visible catastrophe, just a rideshare at 9 p.m. and the sound of the campground going quiet. That moment was entirely preventable. 4 weeks in a rental, one honest conversation before the purchase. That's all it would have taken. The van doesn't create the relationship you want, it reveals the one you already have. Make sure you've actually looked at it before you go shopping. What the 30% do differently. The retirees who don't regret this aren't luckier, they're not wealthier. They applied a 4-part framework before they ever walked into a dealership. Test first. Minimum 4 weeks in a rental in the same category of vehicle you're considering. Different weather, different terrain, different parking situations. That test costs a few $1,000s. It saves you from an $80,000 mistake. Highest ROI decision in the entire buyer journey, and almost nobody does it. Buy proven platforms through documented service networks. In the US, Winnebago,
Airstream, Pleasureway on Transit and Sprinter chassis with national dealer coverage. In Europe, Heimer, Berstner, Carthago, brands where cross-border service is a real, functional network, not a promise in a glossy brochure. Right size ruthlessly. The aspiration is always bigger. The reality rewards smaller. A 19 to 21-foot Class B motorhome is far more practical for two retirees than a 25-foot plus Class C. Parks anywhere. Manageable solo. The functional advantage of going bigger almost always collapses within the first 3 months. Run the full first-year cost model before you sign anything. Not a rough estimate, a spreadsheet with actual insurance quotes, campsite budgets mapped to real routing, fuel projections, and a maintenance reserve. If the number doesn't work at your income level, adjust the plan, not the math. David and Carol skipped all 4, not because they were careless. David ran logistics operations for 30 decades. They skipped them because nobody presented the framework clearly enough to make them feel like they were missing something critical. Now you know you'd be missing something. Who should buy? Who should wait? You're ready to buy if you've completed a minimum 4-week trial run without serious relationship friction in a confined space. You have a full first-year operating budget that doesn't require selling anything or drawing down non-recoverable capital. You've identified specific vehicles on proven platforms with verifiable service history, and you can answer this clearly. What does my exit look like if I need to stop within 18 months? Wait if you're buying to escape something that hasn't been resolved. Van life amplifies emotional states. It doesn't dissolve them. Also wait if you're financing above 40% at current rates, if your health requires geographic stability, or if you've never done a genuine multi-week trial run with the person you're planning to bring along. Here's where I land in 2026. Van life for retirees is genuinely viable. Some of the most well-designed retirements I've encountered involve a well-chosen camper van and 2 people who treated the decision like the serious financial and relational commitment it actually is. But the industry is still selling the dream. The content ecosystem is still showing you the golden hour shots and the cliff edge views in the couples who look like they've never had a difficult conversation in their lives. And it's doing that because enthusiasm sells vehicles and frustration doesn't generate affiliate commissions. David sat alone in a dark van the night he sold it. That moment didn't have to happen. It was entirely the product of an information gap, created and maintained by an ecosystem that profits from keeping buyers inspired rather than informed. The 70% who regret it didn't lack the dream, they lacked the system, and they lacked someone willing to tell them the truth before they signed. You now have both. What you do with it is up to you. One question, and I want an honest answer in the comments. If you knew right now there was a 50% chance you'd resell this van at a $20,000 loss within 12 months, would you still buy it? Your answer tells you more about your actual readiness than any spec sheet or dealer conversation ever will. Drop it below. I read every one.